Hey there, and welcome back. If this is your first time seeing one of my videos, I'm glad you stopped by. Pull up a chair and get comfy. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about borderline personality disorder and the concept of a favorite person, or FP as it is commonly referred to. Now this concept isn't something that's actually had a whole lot of scientific research done about it. A lot of information that is out there has been gathered based on shared experiences of people with borderline personality disorder or borderline personality traits. And I've been seeing this cropping up on my social media a lot lately, which is really funny timing because it's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. It's something that I've been having to deal with. So I figured, hey, let's talk about it. Before we get into that, as always, I want to just let you know that I am not a professional. I do not have any kind of licensing or degrees in psychology. Everything that I speak about is based on my own personal experience as well as the research I do independently. What exactly is a favorite person? Now, you might think like, oh, that's like my BFF, that's my fave person. But it's more than just a cute way of saying best friend when in the context of someone with borderline personality features. This is someone who that person really relies on for their own sense of identity and self-worth. And when someone has borderline personality, they tend to have unstable relationships anyway. And often the fear of abandonment comes up, as well as splitting, which is basically that cycle of idealizing somebody and then devaluing them. So one minute they're the greatest person in the world, the next minute they are, somebody that you don't want to be around anymore. This type of behavior and thinking and feeling can be exacerbated in a favorite person relationship. Something that's important to know is that the person with borderline personality does not choose this. We don't go walking around looking for our next victim. Oh, that's going to be the person that's my favorite person. It doesn't work that way. There really is no conscious thought that goes into choosing that person. This person can be your partner, it can be a friend, a relative, your therapist. Sometimes it can even be like celebrities or fictional characters, in which case the relationship plays out more within the imagination. Someone can have multiple favorite people, although this is probably not likely to be more than a handful, and it is also more likely that somebody would just have one, or maybe they would have a few favorite people, but there's one that is above all the rest. Now, I personally would not choose to have this kind of relationship, as it can be exhausting and chaotic. So that's what I mean when I say that, like, people don't choose to do this. I haven't met a single person who was like, oh yeah, this is great fun and something that I definitely would like to pursue and continue for the rest of my life. Now, someone with borderline personality might be overly attached to their FP and become emotionally dependent. They may also use that person's behavior to gauge their own self-worth or sense of identity. Now, this can be dangerous for the person who has borderline personality because it can make it less likely that the person is going to leave a toxic or abusive relationship. Now, because they become emotionally dependent, any slight change in the relationship, even something like a different tone being used or the FP having a different reaction to something than the person with borderline expected, this can lead to extreme thoughts and behaviors from the person with borderline. These intense feelings can lead to increased impulsivity, suicidal thinking, self-harm, and splitting. Now, it's not all bad, okay? There are some decent things that come from this type of relationship. It's very possible to have an FP and still have a healthy relationship with that person, but both people have to know the signs and both people have to work towards it. The key is communication. which is admittedly difficult for those of us who have borderline personality. It requires being open in a way that goes against our nature, because we would much rather run and hide from the more negative emotions and the scarier relationship dynamics than stick with it and communicate. But that is the only way that this relationship is going to work. Um, Now, how can you tell if you are in a relationship that has this favorite person dynamic? Because a lot of what goes on is tied into that feeling of abandonment. In order to avoid it, the person with borderline personality will give all of their attention and energy to their favorite person, to the exclusion of others. You may cancel plans with other people to be with them, or you might avoid making plans in case that person becomes available and wants to hang out. Now, because you give all of your emotional energy to that favorite person, you can feel like you aren't getting as much as you're giving. Since we feel our emotions so intensely, we give it our all, sometimes completely bulldozing over healthy boundaries. When you don't get the attention from your favorite person, it can feel like a deep wound that doesn't heal until they finally give you the affection that you're really wanting. While this can happen with a lot of our relationships, it is more intense with the FP. For instance, I get upset when I don't hear from my friends. Sometimes I'll wonder if I did something wrong. I might text them and see if they're mad at me. With my favorite person, it feels like a gut wrenching loss. My entire day can be dependent upon my interactions with them. I get depressed if I don't hear from them or if they don't react to something as strongly as I had hoped. But if they give me more attention than usual or I get to spend time with them, I become elated. This emotional dependency is part of why splitting in this type of relationship can be so severe. Any perceived abandonment or rejection can feel like a knife to the heart. It can literally feel like dying. I have had panic attacks when I thought my FP had decided they were done with me. Alternatively, it can trigger intense anger, especially if somebody triggers that really lovely green emotion, jealousy. Hung out with somebody other than me, and that's the reason you didn't have time to text me back or call me. Yeah, no, we're done. Bye. Like, it's just not going to be taken very well. And because we are prone to overanalyzing, we can perceive threats that don't even occur to be problematic for other people. Now, another sign that your relationship has that favorite person dynamic is that you begin to take on the goals and values of this person. You can begin to absorb who they are and take that on as your own identity. This is something that can happen with any relationship, but is more likely to happen with an FP. I think we start to take on their idiosyncrasies because it increases the chance that they won't abandon us. They're less likely to pull away if we have a lot in common, right? Well, maybe not, but I personally don't like disagreeing with my FP because I am afraid that that disagreement is going to be the thing that makes them walk away. So, how can we take a relationship that seems to be built on chaos and turn it into a more positive relationship that can be beneficial to both people, as well as lay a foundation for healthy interactions with others for the person who has borderline? Now, this is going to take efforts on the part of both people. So you're going to have the favorite person is going to have some things to make that possible, and the person with borderline personality is going to have some things to make that possible. Now, it can be very difficult if you are the favorite person, because one of the first things you need to know is they're probably not going to tell you that you're their favorite person. If they do, it's probably going to be said in the context of being able to pass it off as a joke or just being kind of cutesy and stuff without really getting into the nitty gritty of what that means. I know that I personally don't tell people when I form those kind of attachments, because I am scared that that is going to come on too strong and send them running. And the last thing I want to do with my favorite person is send them running. It's kind of the opposite of what I'm looking for. Now, even if you aren't told about that, you can kind of pick up on some of the cues that I discussed earlier and see if you think maybe that does describe your friend or loved one. You can ask them, you can go to them and say, I get the sense that this is a really important relationship to you, and I just want to make sure that we can manage it in a healthy way. Just don't come on too strong, because that can actually have a negative effect and put the guard up for somebody who has borderline, because I know, at least for me, I don't like to be vulnerable like that. I don't like people being able to see through me that way. So I wouldn't react to that very well. With that being said, communication is key, as I mentioned before. And when I say this, I mean, when you don't answer a text message for a few hours because you're busy, in your head, it's probably not even on your radar to think about sending a text message because you're busy doing all of these other things. Meanwhile, your friend who has borderline personality could literally be watching the phone the entire time, waiting for a response. And the longer you take to respond, the worse the feelings get. And that is when you are likely to get either the barrage of the text messages, are you mad at me? What are you doing? Where are you? Why aren't you responding? And or complete shutdown on the part of the person with BPD. And that will lead to the splitting, where when you were texting back and forth, everything was fine. You were on the greatest person in the world, godlike status. You put your phone down, you get busy with something else. 5 hours goes by before you pick up your phone again. That 5 hours that their text messages were left unresponded to is enough to make them think the relationship is over. And so when I say that communication is key, what I really mean is, if you are not going to be available, let them know. Give them a time frame. Let them know what's going on. Make it very clear. It has nothing to do with you. I have this going on. And I know that that can seem kind of annoying to some people, but it makes a world of difference to somebody who is used to living on this edge of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because what you have to keep in mind is that living with borderline means that you are always waiting for the person that you're with to get up and leave. It's an expectation. It's just a matter of when. And so you do all of these things to try to avoid that happening. But the fear never goes away. And so anything that you can do to minimize that fear is going to be helpful in maintaining a balanced relationship. Now, with that said, they're going to be relying on you for a lot of emotional validation. They may come to you for advice or for approval or to be soothed. And it may feel like you are the only person who is taking care of your friend. And you might be right. And that's just something to know. Like, if you are the favorite person in this type of relationship, you are going to be the person who is emotionally relied upon. That doesn't mean you can't put up boundaries. It is important to keep yourself safe, and it is important to keep your own mental health in a good place. You should never sacrifice yourself for the other person. And when you have those boundaries, I would say just be upfront about it. From the get-go, just say, I'm not going to be available from this time to this time. You can't text me in the middle of the night. You can't call me with a crisis in the middle of the night. Like, be very upfront about those boundaries, so that it doesn't come as a surprise when it happens in the moment. Because I know for me, like, if I'm sitting here right now and I'm calm and I'm relaxed, and you give me these boundaries, am I going to like them? Maybe not, but rationally I can be like, okay, yeah, I get it. If you wait until that incident is already happening to tell me what that boundary is, it's there's no use by that point. That's just going to be more fuel for the fire. And then the last thing to know about the relationship, if you are the FP, is you will be placed on a pedestal, and the idea that you can do no wrong, mostly. So it is going to be very difficult for the person with borderline to see you as anything negative. And that is why a lot of times we will take on the traits of our favorite person. We will start to align our goals with them, because this idea of like, well, they are perfect and good and everything that I want, so I should imitate that so that I too can be perfect and good and maybe something that I want. And it can feel like that any judgment against you can feel like a judgment against us. That is why the splitting is so bad in an FP relationship, because when you do something that really we can't find a way to get around, that it hurts a lot. And there's a lot of anger and sadness and pain that goes into it. Jealousy is a big one with this one. Jealousy is going to be a major factor. Anytime they see you spending time with somebody else or giving attention or affection to somebody else, then that's going to cause issues. But if you are the favorite person, maintain your boundaries, because you need to stay healthy. Communicate. You cannot communicate too much. You can't do any wrong. You will be idealized, as unfair as that probably is. And we know that you did not choose to be the FP, but we didn't either. We didn't choose to do that. And keep in mind, they may not tell you that they're emotionally dependent on you like that. So you may have to look for context clues, and just know that you are going to be their sounding board. And when you think about all of this, if any of that is something that you just can't do, or you don't have the capacity to do, be very upfront about that, so that, yes, it will hurt, but it hurts less if you do it at the get-go and don't string it along. Now, for those of us with borderline personality, there are a few things that we can do to try to make life a little easier for our FPs. The first is to manage our expectations. We do hold them in real high regard, and we tend to expect them to know what we're thinking. And they can't be available all the time. Nobody can be. It's important to take a step back and to say, what is it that I'm really looking for? And is the way that I'm looking for it a healthy way of going about it? And one way that can be helpful with this is to make friends other than the FP. I know we want to spend all of our time with them, and we don't want to give them up, and we couldn't possibly need anybody else if we have them in our life. That's a lot to put on one person. And if you spread the love a little more, then you can actually have a more balanced relationship with your FP, which is going to lead to a healthier and more fruitful relationship. Make sure the relationship is mutual. Don't be the friend that is always the one who's whining and going on about things. Do you find in your conversations that it's always you talking and them listening? If that's the case, switch it around sometimes. See if there's anything that you can do for your favorite person, and see what you can do to help them out. Be a listening ear for them. Give them a hug when they need it. And don't make assumptions. In the same vein that I said that the favorite person needs to communicate, so does the person with borderline. I find myself in this trap a lot where I don't get a text message response to something I said, and maybe something I said I consider to be a little more vulnerable than I would like. And the more vulnerable the text message, the worse the reaction is if I don't get an immediate response. And I often get told, I'm busy. I don't have my phone on me. My phone died. And these are things that happen. They're rational things. And so really what I have to do is try to remind myself that there are perfectly solid reasons for somebody not responding to me than that they hate me all of a sudden. That something happened within the past 2 minutes that made them start hating me. And I can say that now, and it sounds ridiculous, and I can laugh at myself about it. But the truth is, in the moment, it's really hard to step back and do that. And that is something that we need to just train ourselves to do, and to just ask. Don't make assumptions. If you're not hearing from them for a while, don't just assume. Ask them, hey, just wanted to see if everything was okay. Hadn't heard from you. Just checking in. Is there anything I can do to, to help you out if you're going through a hard time? Or would you, want to meet up for coffee or something like that? You don't have to be so completely out there with it. You don't have to show all your cards, so to speak, and strip bare and walk around like the king's clothes. But it is important to at least show some vulnerability, and let your FP know that maybe they have a stronger meaning to you than a lot of your other relationships do. And I think it's fair to say that. And finally, for my fellow borderline personality people, maintain your own interests. I know that's hard. It is really difficult to do that when you may not really know what your interests are. Don't be afraid to, try things out. Start with, get a cheap sketchbook from the dollar store and a number 2 pencil. See if you like doodling. See if you like writing. Maybe you like to sing and dance around in your bedroom to really loud music. Whatever it is, something that can take your mind off of the relationship and can distract you during those times that your favorite person is not going to be available. So, does having a favorite person suck? Yes. Does being a favorite person suck? I'm sure it can. But it doesn't have to. And if you maintain open communication and use skills to pull yourself out of high emotion situations, then it can actually be really healthy, and you can actually find a lot of healing in it. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you've made it this far, go ahead and leave me a comment with what your favorite thing to do when you're bored is, because I could definitely use some ideas for that. Go ahead and give me a like and ring that bell so that you don't miss the next time I upload a video. Until next time, take care and stay well.